Hey, so what's going on, everyone? So recently I've been trying to figure out some other video ideas to do while I'm waiting on some books to come in that I'm doing unboxings for. So one of the things I do get asked a lot about is my earliest work, and the reason I'm have yet to do an official re-release, all that good stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to rewind time back to December 2008. I released my first self-published book, Notebook of the Mind, The Prelude. And as you can tell, this one is released under my real name, not my pen name. So I get asked a lot about how things came to be, why I chose the indie route, self-publishing route, all that good stuff, and everything pretty much goes back to when I first did this one. So I want to say I was 15 or 16 when I started submitting poems to various contests that were open for high school students. And after I graduated high school, some of those were no longer open to me. Makes sense? One, I'm now a legal adult. Two, those are for high school students, and I'm no longer in high school. So there was a couple of websites where I could just publish my stuff and just put it up and let people read it. And there was a few where I would get the option to enter it in a contest or get it published in a book, stuff like that. Well, there was one company who I'm not going to name for a couple of different reasons that approached me about possibly releasing a book of my own. Now, at this time, I wasn't really pursuing writing like that. This was just something I was doing in my spare time. When I was in college, I wasn't studying writing. I was studying marketing and business. So person asked me, we talked for a little bit, and everything seemed to go pretty well. Like, I had a feeling that this company genuinely believed in me. They wanted to see what I could do. And it's like, all right, sure. So they told me that I would need to give them 40 poems, and that all of the poems that I would send would have to be 25 lines or less. Which for me was both good and bad. It was good because I knew I had 40 poems. It was bad because I felt that some of my better poems were my narrative poems that I was writing at the time that were multiple pages. And with this 25 lines or less, the space in between the stanzas counted as a line. So I had to go through and see what I could do. So I got help from one of my friends. If you checked out some of my previous books, even to this day with my most recent digital release, Omni, a friend of mine, John, was helping me put some of my earliest stuff together. So I had to do something I hadn't really done before and show him everything that was in my 3 or 4 notebooks I had. And there were some poems that, looking back at it, were not necessarily great. So I had to start doing some more writing. It wasn't just, oh, hey, I want to write a poem. It was, hey, these people want me to put together a book. I need to get this thing ready. And it was a challenge. Because once we went through my notebooks and had all the poems that were 25 lines or less, I didn't have 40 poems. Not only did I not have 40 poems, but there were some poems in here that were not good. I did not realize how basic my word structure and my rhyme schemes were when I first started writing. And I did not want to release those. I'm sure at some point in the future they'll end up finding their way online or something, or someone's going to find one of the websites I used to use. Okay, go for it. That's the best thing I can say. So I had to start writing more, and I did not have enough stuff, and I was starting to get anxious. I didn't think I had enough stuff. I didn't think I was good enough at this point. I was even like, why did I agree to this? Now keep in mind, I hadn't signed anything yet. They just wanted me to submit something to see if it was worth publishing. So at the time, I hadn't signed anything. I could have said no. I could have backed out. But because I'd already said yes, it was like, okay, I need to do this. So over the course of 3 months, I wrote a whole lot of poems to try to fill this 40 poem gap, the requirement for 40 poems. And at the end of it, I ended up coming up with 45. I was like, nah, the minimum's 40. I might want to save some stuff for later. And I took out a couple of them that ended up making their way into my second and third books, Shadows and Sunshine and Awakening with the Sea. But that ended up putting me at less than 40 once again. So I looked at some of my longer poems and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to take some of my longer poems and cut them up into multiple pieces and just spread part 1, part 2, part 3, however many parts it is, throughout the book. So when I told John what I wanted to do, he was like, go for it. And he gave me a list of poems that he thought would make decent standalones, but still, once people read all the parts, it would turn into a really good poem. So went through there, took everything I had, looked at it. I don't want to say I was happy. I'm never like, yay, this is the best thing ever. But it was enough for me to go, all right, I think I've got something here. Showed it to John, and he tweaked a couple things here and there. And there was a couple of poems that I picked that he ended up saying, hey, how about instead you put this poem in here, this poem in here. And he's better with some of this stuff than I am. So I was like, all right, cool. I took his word for it. I trusted him. And I took out a couple of poems that I wanted in favor of the poems that he thought were better fit for the book. So I now have the 40 poem requirement that this publisher wanted. So I submit them, and I got some feedback. And for the most part, the feedback was good. There was a couple of poems that they didn't like, and there was a couple of poems that were asked if I could tweak them again. It's like, okay, sure. And then it came time for some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that made me a little hesitant. First, I got the contract in the mail. Obviously, I'm going to read this thing. And I also had another friend of mine, Travis, read over the contract. Even though it's standard practice, one of the things I didn't like was the rights were going to go away. I wasn't going to have any creative control. Meaning that once I send this to them, I don't have any rights to it. And if they felt the need to change something, they could. And they wouldn't need my feedback on it. I didn't like that. I also saw what some of the royalties were going to be. And once again, it was going to be like pennies to the dollar, and it wasn't really going to be... I'm not saying that royalties are great for independent authors or any independent acts in general, but I was going to be getting like anywhere from 2 to 4 cents per book sold, and the book was going to be, I think they were talking about a $15.99 retail price. This is the size of the book, and it was going to sell for $15.99. The other thing I didn't like was I was going to have to go into working on the second book almost immediately. Not only was I going to have to go into working on the second book immediately, but there was no guaranteed release date. At the time when I was working on this, it was early 2008. I was told it might not even come out in 2009. But I was going to have to go on ahead and hurry up on submitting what ended up becoming my second book, Shadows and Sunshine. And something just didn't feel right with me. I'm aware that with various contracts, and like I said, this doesn't go for just writing and for publishers. I think there's also similar things for music as well. But I was going to be sitting on a book that was possibly not going to get released for another year, possibly 2 years, and I was going to have to hurry up and submit my second book before my first book even gets released. During this time, I had a job. I was a full-time student in school, and this wasn't something I was trying to heavily pursue at the time. So not only were they trying to put me in a position where I was going to have to put all my eggs in one basket, but I was being left in the dark on a release date for the first book. I was being left in the dark on what changes they were going to make to my book. And on top of all that, while I'm supposed to have the first book fresh in my mind when promotion stuff starts, I'm going to be knee-deep in working on my second book. And I didn't know how I felt about it. So I talked to both my friends on this one, and I said, hey, I don't think I'm going to sign the contract. And they're my friends, so obviously they backed me on what I said on this one. So I was like, yeah, don't do that. So I called the person up and I said, hey, I'm sorry, but I cannot sign this. I don't like the idea of being put under pressure to work on a follow-up when the first book I'm getting ready to release isn't going to come out for possibly 2 years. Not to mention, I'm a full-time student in school, and I'm not an English major. I'm not a creative writing major. I'm a business major. I was studying business management, business administration, and marketing. That was what I was in school for. So I didn't feel comfortable signing the contract and having to put that much time into something and not have anything to show for it for a few years. The guy really couldn't say anything. He did sound upset because I think he was thinking I was going to sign it. I think he thought it was going to be an easy sign. But there was never a counter offer. There was never, do you want to try again? Do you want us to call you back in a year or so? Nothing. It was, understand, best of luck, and the guy hung up on me. That was it. And even though at the time I wasn't looking at trying to pursue writing, here I am with a finished book on my hands. Like, I had it right there on my hard drive. So it's like, what can I do here? I got to find some way to release this. I was like, even if this is the only book I ever release, at least I have something and I have a claim. Like, hey, I published a book. And over the course of, I want to say I turned them down in March, and this finally got a release in December of 2008. So from March to December, I did look at various windows. I did look at publishing. I looked at various publishers. I checked out every avenue I could. And then I came across the now out of print website WordClay, which was a self-publishing website. So I submit to them my book. I can either pay for a cover, I can use one of their standard ones for free. If I needed additional editing, they could bring in an editor, which I would have to pay for because, again, self-publishing, I'm not really under a contract or anything like that. So I thought to myself, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I will put my book out through this way. That way, I don't have a ton of copies, and then if no one buys it, I'm let down. It's a print on demand thing, so I can order as many as I need or as many as I can afford. So that's what I did. It's like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot, see what I think. So, December 2008, Notebook of the Mind, The Prelude, was released through WordClay. It features 40 poems, all of which I wrote during my teenage years, with a couple of exceptions when I was trying to put together some better poems when I was going to release this through a publisher. And I can't say it sold well. To be honest, I don't even remember how many I sold. And I was selling them at a loss at first because I didn't think people would pay a certain amount for the book because of how thin it is. So I think I ended up ordering like 50 copies, and all 50 copies ended up selling over the course of a few months. Which for me, I mean, I was happy because it showed that there was some interest. Even if it was only 50 copies and it was my first book, there was interest. And I managed to have enough stuff to where I did have my second book, Shadows and Sunshine, available a couple of months later. To this day, I'm still not a fan of that book for a couple different reasons. I'll do a video for that in the near future. And I did one more book with WordClay before they shut down, which was my third book, Awakening with the Sea. Now, these 3 books are no longer in print. There is a re-released version of Awakening with the Sea available on Amazon. And I have a digital version of this available on Amazon as well. But the overall thing here is you've got to start somewhere. And at that time, I didn't know anything about the anthology game outside of the contest I did when I was in high school. So I didn't know about these independent publishers that did anthologies on a monthly, yearly basis. It's like, all right, I'm just going to send this and see what happens. So while it's not my bestseller, it does not feature my best work by any means. This is where I started. And it did well enough and was well received enough to where I'm actually doing this on a more consistent basis now. Like, I now have my own Amazon page and got this channel. And now poetry book number 9 is out. This one's number 1. So as far as ever doing a re-release of this book, I do want to confirm that there are some poems in here that did appear on websites that are still up. They appeared in anthologies that are either still that have since went out of print, or through various special ordering, you can order certain ones. But some of the poems in this book will be appearing in Elsewhere, which is my compilation poetry book of all my poems that have appeared elsewhere. To anyone that would like me to eventually go back and do a re-release of my first 3 books, which is Notebook of the Mind, Shadows and Sunshine, and Awakening with the Sea, comment down below. Now, I do want to say I'm not going to re-release each one individually. I'm thinking about doing like an early works compilation book that would be all 3 books in one. So keep that in mind. I'm not doing single issued books. It's going to be one giant book with all the poems from all 3 books. But a lot of you have been asking how I got my start. This is how I got my start, and my experience on getting this published is why I went the independent route. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not against one day signing or doing something with a major publisher, but I've been doing really well the last few years as an independent author. So I feel like I need to know I know my worth, and I'm not just going to sign the first contract that's put in front of me, because I've turned down other contracts in the past. To any of my other independent authors out there what's your first experience like? Do you remember the first time you released something, or the first time a publisher reached out to you? What was that experience like, and what made you choose to sign or choose not to sign? But that is going to do it for this video. If you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you like what you see, leave a thumbs up. Comment down below. Do you want to see a re-release of my first 3 books? Are you looking forward to Elsewhere, in which you will get to read some of the poems that appear in Notebook of the Mind? I'm warning everyone now, some of those poems I wrote, I was 14, 15 years old. Very basic rhyme scheme, very basic structure. If this is your first book of mine you read, please do not judge my skills based on that. I have improved a lot since then. But that is going to do it for this one. So thank you all for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.